get started. And the recording is started. Okay. Yeah, this is a little bit odd for me to be doing it this way because I've always been at the Goggle Works. And we've normally split the attendance between the Goggle Works and the Zoom. But the Zoom seems to be very popular, even though we do the in-person. It's a different experience, meeting in person. So Tom, the last time you presented, you were there in person. That was nice. And we had a packed room that night too.
Yeah,
So, hopefully Jay will schedule you again after your next trips, and then you can join us at the Goggle Works again
Yeah.
sure.
or
I'll
the
put
Google
it on
Works.
my
So Jay, hit him up already. Get him in the schedule again. So welcome everyone, and just a couple quick announcements as usual. We do have our paid guest in 2 weeks, and Vince, you can introduce that. We also have Rebecca first Monday of December, and she is going to have a workshop follow up on that one too. So that's all that information, like we always say, is in your newsletter. So read your newsletter, right, Jenny? Um, the other thing is our members meeting is coming up again, and we do again press for volunteers to join the board, step up to be president, treasurer, and so forth. So we're still looking to fill those spots. Um, Kim had a wonderful shoot a couple weeks ago for Halloween. That was a lot of fun. And we had a lot of participants and a lot of equipment there. Kim's bought some new equipment, so that's exciting for us because she always volunteers all that equipment. And Rick, I think Rick is here, isn't he? Yeah, Rick's here. So Rick and Kim always put that together, and we really appreciate that. And it was a lot of fun. And the models really got into it. It was a family affair, right? It was mom and were both of them her sons, and they're already planning for next year. They're already talking about what can we dress as next year, and I forget what they're talking about, but they're excited and excited to do that. And we did have somebody walk in thinking this was open to the public, didn't we, Kim? Towards the end, while we were already breaking down, so somebody picked it up on the Facebook feed and thought that it was open to the public, and if they dressed up like Beetlejuice, we were going to take pictures. So that could be an option for us next year, sort of like a Santa shoot, except on Halloween. So we had a mom and her son come in dressed up, waiting for their picture opportunity. But we had already torn down the lights already, or else we would have done that for them. So uh, people outside the membership are picking up our media. Thank you, Jenny. And they are seeing this somewhere, and they mistakenly thought that they were supposed to dress up as Beetlejuice, and they came in as Beetlejuice. About 5-10 minutes too late, though, towards the end of it. So Kim and I were talking about that. Maybe we could set something like that up at the Goggle Works next year and do a public shoot, sort of like we do at the Santa shoot. And we do have the Santa shoot lined up, right, Kim? We have one. And what's the date again? You're muted.
14th.
Okay.
The second week in December.
December 14th. That's at the market, like usual. And we're not going to have a second one this year because we're not doing Boscov's, correct?
No, but we could do one at the on site on the 7th. We got to talk about that at the board meeting.
So that's right now in the works. If we can put another one together, we might do one at the Goggle Works and just advertise that real quick and see if we can get some traffic that way. Other than that, I don't have anything else that I can think of. Anything else, Ginny, that I missed from the newsletter? Vince, anything you want to mention? Oh, you're muted, Vince. Still muted. Why are you still muted?
There we go.
Yeah,
We have our schedule as in the newsletter. We have one more talk. Jonathan Vanes on the 18th. Jonathan had been our judge. He's a wonderful post-processing photographer. And in the next newsletter, there's an announcement about a new offering that he has for a Photoshop workshop, a two-part thing. He had offered to do it for us. I told him that wasn't going to work, and he's now promoting this kind of to the general public as a little different approach. So look for that announcement in the next newsletter.
Okay.
That'll be the last outside speaker of the year.
Yeah, and our final competition is
November 25, and I just sent everything to Henry Rowan.
okay.
And that's his 5th year in a row working for us.
Okay. And I will be sending our winners to the PSA competition this week or next week, and I might have to get some of you to renew your release forms. I think some of them ran out in October, so I got to check that tomorrow. So you might hear from me if you're going to send an image in this year. You have to renew it. I think they're good for 3 years or something like that. So I think Ginny and Vince, yours might have ran out. So you'll hear from me this week. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jay and Tom, and I'll mute myself so you won't hear me for a while.
All right, can everybody hear me, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick note, in December, we got something really special coming up in December. December 2nd, Becky Carpenter is going to be photographing the figure in the landscape and abandoned spaces and incorporating textures to create digital and 3D collaged images. That's going to be really, really interesting. Different type of approach to photography, kind of mixed media with photography. And she's doing a follow-up Saturday, December 7th workshop at the Goggle Works. So look in the newsletter for that. I think you would really enjoy going to that session. So check that out in the newsletter. And now I'm going to pass it on to Tom and Meg Story, who are going to share about their wonderful expedition to the Arctic. So go ahead, Tom, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my desktop here. You see that?
Yep. Just have to make it full screen.
I'm getting there.
Yep.
And get rid of this. There we go. Oops, let me go back. So it's fun for us to be able to talk about this trip. We took this trip in the early first 2 weeks in September, and it was really a memorable trip, and we'll talk about it here. So first of all, I wanted to get you a little oriented in terms of why the Arctic. For us, we've enjoyed through the years going to wild and remote places, and the more remote, sometimes the better for us. And the other driver was, global warming and the changes that are happening in the north and in the very far south may be impacting these places, and they may not be what they were previously. So we wanted to go see them now. Additionally, we enjoy learning about the native cultures that are indigenous to the areas that we're going to. And photographically, it's a very unique area. So let me move this down so you can see better. So from August 27th to September 12th, we journeyed on this path that you can see mostly through the Canadian Arctic islands and a little bit of the west coast of Greenland. We give you an idea, we're down here in the Philadelphia area, and the farthest north we went was about 2,400 miles north of where we are sitting today. So if you can think that you're getting on a jet plane, you're going to fly in 5 or 6 hours to get up there just due north. Gives you an idea how far away it is. You can see the Arctic Circle line, the way it cuts through here. So our whole trip was north of the Arctic Circle. Additionally, give you a little more perspective. If normally you don't see the polar view of the land masses. But if you look on the left here, it gives you a better idea of the size of Greenland and the size of the Arctic islands that we were going through, and the other parts of the Arctic in Russia and the northern part of Europe. The areas we traversed were circled in red. Additionally, if you look on the right side, it tells you that while, the big difference between the North Pole and the South Pole is there are people at the North Pole, or at least in the northern Arctic areas. This map, the red, is a little counterintuitive, but the red is smaller and the lighter colors over here are bigger. But even then we're talking, tens of thousands of people. The areas that we traversed, a village, if it was more than 5,000 people, that was big. So this gives you an idea of what we're dealing with a little bit. The other thing I want to orient people to is Nunangat and the Inuit. A little bit of the Inuit Inuktitut. I'm trying to remember how to say it. But Inuk is a person, and Inuit are people. And Nunangat is a place where the Inuit live. In the total of the whole area of Nunangat are only less than 60,000 people, even though it's 35% of the Canadian landmass and 50% of the Canadian coastline. Nunavut came into being, so to speak, right around the turn of the century. And it's a confederation, and it's self-governed under the auspices of the Canadian federal government. Following that, Nunavik, which is this area, and Nunatsiavut and Inuvialut followed. So together they comprise the Nunangat. We journeyed principally, well, really only other than the western part of Greenland, we journeyed through Nunavut, and it was a pretty interesting place. If you get a little bit over here in the lower left-hand corner, you get an idea of where this sits in the geography of the U.S. and Canada. If there's any questions, just, if they're important, let me know what they are. So a little bit about what were our expectations, and when you go into a trip like this, you need to think about it, and not just that you're going and you're excited to go, but you need to learn quite a bit. Read about the environment, learn about the wildlife, learn about the culture. It makes the trip so much more immersive and enjoyable. The other thing is, when we talk about a cruise, we're talking about an expedition cruise. That's different than you would think of your luxury cruises or just cruising in the Caribbean or various places. An expedition cruise, you seldom dock at any cities, very seldom, if any. You're on and off the ship daily via Zodiacs, typically, and you're out in the environment with little to no protection. So you need to understand that environment. So we were looking at the Arctic climate, and in September we thought we would be experiencing from the upper 20s to the low 40s, and certainly some rain and snow, but we didn't get a lot of that, but it was windy, quite windy at times, and foggy. But that's what you're going to be out in. The physical demands, we're used to being in Zodiacs because we've sailed quite a bit, but you need to understand what Zodiac travel is like and how you're going to land, how you're going to get in and out of the Zodiacs. And principally what we took away from our experience was you're going to carry what you need or want over multiple hours away from the ship. So you need to kind of get your head oriented as to that type of travel. And the other thing is you want to be able to move over rough terrain, including getting in and out of the Zodiacs. So whatever gear you're going to have with you, you need to keep that in mind. So what did we take? Well, like I said, do your prep. So from a clothing standpoint, you want to know the environment and you want to be able to dress in layers. Either wool or cold weather synthetics are highly recommended. Wool does really well because it just deals with the environment. It doesn't get wet, it breathes, as do the synthetics. The other major thing is you want to wet proof yourself, so to speak. So you would need a good shell, you need rain pants, good solid rain pants, hiking boots, and to my wife's, thanks to my wife, we had hand and toe warmers, which really were kind of nice to have along. The expedition provided a high quality external shell, which you'll see a lot in the pictures, was a kind of a sky blue color. And they provided waterproof boots, just pull on rubber boots to get in and out of wet landings. So that was our approach with the clothing going in. In terms of photo equipment, again, we moved to Olympus about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, principally because my major principle in photography is you got to be there to get the photograph. And things are becoming bigger and heavier and harder to lug around for us. So we moved to the 4/3 camera size, and I have an OM1 and Meg uses an EM5. Both cameras have excellent weather protection, lighter weight. And so that helped with our weather concerns a fair amount. We took 4 lenses with us, a 12 to 100. Now remember, this is the size shown here is for Olympus. If you want to get a full frame equivalent, double it. So the 12 to 100 was really a 24 to 200 if you're thinking of a full frame camera. Likewise, we took a 12 to 40, a 40 to 150, and I took a 300 millimeter with me. So those were the 4 lenses we took. Meg used the 12 to 100 a lot. I used the other ones, and I actually didn't use 12 to 40 as much as I thought I might. No tripods, just because it's another thing to haul around. Plus, you seldom have either the place or the time, or the environment, so to speak, to use a tripod. And Olympus has excellent image stabilizations, as do many cameras do these days. And the tripods, as I said, are just not practical in Zodiac environment. We personally use cotton carriers a lot, which is shown up here in the upper right-hand corner, which is a harness that you put on, and there's a fitting that you can screw into the bottom of your camera, which fits in this little slot right here. Once you put it in and it locks in by just a 90-degree turn of the camera, your hands free. You've got both hands free. The camera is snug to you, and it's really been a good system for us. Yeah, there's safety straps. There's also a weather cover in this little bag here. So it's a really nice setup. The other thing is we put everything into a medium-sized backpack, kind of, I guess, the size of a school backpack, a little bit thicker, but not very big. You want to keep in mind that we carry that with us. We hand carry it throughout. And so if you're going to get on planes, going to get in and out of Zodiacs, you're going to get around, you want something that's not too large. And that's where Olympus fit the bill for us. I could get all our gear in there, including our little TG5, which is a point and shoot camera, in this pack, and that's what I carried along. The other thing we kind of decided on was when we went off, in the Zodiacs or going ashore, we didn't want to be changing lenses a lot. So kind of what we decided for that day was what we were taking. That's what we took. We didn't take any extra lenses with us. It was just too bulky and too many things to carry. Except we did take the little point and shoot waterproof camera, because that came in handy at times. And other times, in some of the environments we were in, we could actually stick it underwater and take some shots of things that were of interest. And we took a laptop, and make sure you take an external storage device, because you want to make sure you back up daily. And so that was kind of the gear. That's what we took with us. So what is expedition ship life like? This is the Ocean Endeavor. It's the ship that Adventure Canada uses. It takes typically around 180 to 190 paying guests, and a expedition team of roughly around 40. And then the rest of the ship has a ship's crew and a kind of a hotel staff that does the rest of the ship. And yeah, for food and for taking care of the rooms and so on. Expedition travel, as you may understand, is the focus is on the natural world and the local culture. It certainly is nice not to have to pack up and move day by day or several days by several days. So once you get settled on board, everything was with you. It was comfortable, but it's certainly not luxurious. But it was a comfortable ship to be on. I think I've hit these things. Typical day,
Hey,
you know.
Tom,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you stopped sharing your screen. Did you want to?
I
No.
see it. I see a screen.
I see.
Okay.
I
There's
see
a-
everything.
There's a tab in the upper left corner. It's the meeting tab for Zoom and the Tom's screen. So you may have hit that
Okay,
inadvertently.
I apologize.
Sure.
Okay,
As
good.
long as we're stopped for a minute, I have a question.
Sure.
Did you pack did you pack the equipment for both of you in the one backpack, right?
Yes, we did. So
Okay,
you can
that's what I
see,
thought. Based on what you said there, that looks great. So compact.
if you look down here, these are the two camera bodies.
Right.
Can you see the pointer?
Yep,
You
I
know,
do.
This was the 300. This was the Middle Lake Zoom. This was the other Zoom was here, and Meg's. Well, I don't remember, but these are the four
Right.
lenses right here, and then other stuff here, like batteries and chargers and various other paraphernalia. This is my lens or the filter case, and this was the little hand shooting camera, and that's a mouse just to give you an idea of size. So
Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
It's amazing everything that you can fit into that bag.
yeah, and this is a forgot. Anyway, it's a really rugged, nicely done bag, and it's a pretty waterproof. I wouldn't say it's waterproof, but it's certainly has had its share of being water resistant over our travels. I wouldn't want to leave it underwater, but it's pretty tough. Oops, let's get here. All right. So back to a couple of Zodiac excursions a day. The other thing is the expedition team is really key to your experience. If you're researching a trip, an expedition trip, I highly recommend that you get some idea of who the team leaders are, plus who the subject experts are that'll be coming along, and the ratio of expedition team to passengers. It really makes the trip, as you'll probably gather a little bit as we go along here. Well, let me go here. So just to give you an idea, we were in a middle grade cabin. It was a fourth deck of 9 where most of the cabins were, and then another set of cabins were up on the 7th deck and a few on the 8th deck. But over here, Meg said these are 2 single beds, and if you look on the right picture, this is the end of the single bed. You can see there's not a lot of room, between the end of the bed and everything else. It's pretty compact. You have a TV screen that it's a CCTV. You can watch the presentations or the lectures that are going on the screen, or you can go to the meeting room to see them. This area was kind of just around the corner and gave us a little room to move around in. It was not a lot of space, but it was comfortable. Really, you don't spend that much time, at least we didn't, in the room. This, not a lot of living space, but this is where I'm not going to go through a lot of the other spaces. There was a restaurant at the other end of the ship at the forward end. This was at the aft end. And this is where we spent a lot of time with whatever briefings that were going on. And believe me, there were briefings going on a lot of the time, lectures, yeah. This is a typical day, which you see on the screen in your room, and which is briefed usually the night before. Normally you get together in the evening before dinner and talk about the day, what the day had in store that you just experienced, and what was coming up typically the next day. So there was an disembarkation. Usually they did it by groups of about 30 each. So there was about 180 people. There are briefings that are going on during the day, lectures, and so on. It's a full experience. You can keep yourself busy the whole day long. Usually the meal times up here, you get an idea that talk about the daylight time typically. The sun was coming up at 5:30. It was getting light at 4:30. And its sunset was around, this is what, 8 o'clock, almost 9 o'clock, but it didn't get really dark. Maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. In the Arctic, And we're there now in early September, north of the Arctic Circle. The sun goes down, takes a long time to go down because it's going down at an angle, which you'll see in some of our shots, which makes the light special really when you're up in the Arctic, as you'll see. So physically, just to give you an idea, this is typically what goes on during the day. So you're going to gear up daily in your cabin. That's the first thing you do, get all your layers on, get your gear set and so on for the type of day. Then you're going to move to the mudroom where you can get your PFD, your personal flotation device, your life vest you need to wear, and also get your rubber boots on, change your shoes there, and get ready to head out to the Zodiac platform, which is shown here at the side of the ship. Keep in mind, you're gonna leave the ship in typically for about 3 to 4 hours. You can come back at any time if you need to. They'll run you back, but typically you want to plan to be out 3 to 4 hours. And this is a nice day, and it's nice and calm. There were some days that it wasn't like that. It was pretty wet, it was rainy, and it can get rough, and which makes it a little bit of a challenge getting in and out. So take only what you can handle in and out of the Zodiac, plus moderately rugged terrain. If you want to move around and enjoy the on-land experience, be prepared to move. Keep your hands free. So a little bit about Zodiac travel. We're now geared up and waiting in the mudroom. Everybody had a placard on their sleeve, which was read by a reader as you're going out and coming back. So they kept track very carefully. Didn't want to leave anybody behind. This is getting into the Zodiacs. There were 2 platforms. The able seamen were there to help you in and out and secure the Zodiac to the platform. And then stepping off the platform into the Zodiac. They're moderate steps. They're not terrible by any means. But that gives you an eye of the physicality involved. So what else? So getting ready, this is Meg all geared up, got her layers on, she has her harness on, the camera's secured to the vest. Usually we took a small backpack with us because we take our hiking boots in the backpack. 99% of the landings were wet landings, like sort of shown here in the lower right, which, excuse me, which is you're getting in and out, standing in water. I mean, they could only get the Zodiac so far. And plus some of the environment was a little slushy and wet. So typically you'd go up a little ways and then change out your rubber boots and get your hiking boots on. But you're going to carry everything you need, your batteries, lenses, if you're carrying any. We really didn't. Weather was typically in the 20s as we were in the morning and maybe in the 40s in the afternoon. It was more wet than not. And you wanted to be able to take the light when you have it, because there were times the light was just fantastic, and there are other times it was foggy and you couldn't see much. So you wanted to grab it when you could. Also, make sure you get into your cabin and back things up each day. The last thing you want to do is lose a bunch of images because something happened. Because you're only there, you've gone through all this effort, you want to make sure you got them. So here's our route showing the islands. This is over here in the upper right is the west coast of Greenland. Greenland is over here. The North Pole is kind of up and to the left a little bit. It's up this way. So that's north. And then this is Hudson Bay down here a ways. So you're way above that. All of this is above the Arctic Circle. So I'm going to use this map throughout. This is the Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage runs along this area here. You can go out this way if the ice allows you, but it typically doesn't. And usually you come down this way and over here. Off to the left, off the left side of the image is the north coast of Alaska. So that gives you an idea what we're dealing with. So I'm going to run through our trip a little bit and talk about each place a little bit. We flew from Toronto into Kangerlussuaq, if I can get my tongue untied, Kangerlussuaq, which is actually an old abandoned airstrip used in a strategic by the U.S. strategic forces in the 80s and the 90s. It was abandoned and ceded over to Greenland. And yet they use it. It's a long runway. It's the longest runway in Greenland. and large planes can come in and land there. There's not much else there but the runway and a few support buildings, and that's it. But we landed there and got trucked down through a variety of interesting vehicles, some school buses and other things to get us down to the point we could get the Zodiacs out to the ship, which was waiting in this very long fjord right here to pick us up. And then we went out and went around to Sissamut, which is this town, one of the larger towns actually in west of Greenland. And I'm not going to try and say it, but that's the Inuktitut name of the fjord, place of many antlers. This is Sissamut. It's a town, roughly 5,000 people or so. It's one of the major towns on Greenland's west coast that's used for refueling and a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, for fuel, food, water, and so on, for much of the shipping on the west coast. It was an interesting place, but we walked the town and came back, and we're ready to move on, I guess I could say. And the next day we went to the place of many antlers, and this was the morning. It was a morning excursion in the Zodiac. Pretty lovely place. Typically, this is how you would come in through the Zodiacs and land here, come out, get rid of your rubber boots, which are over here, and come up and into the tundra. This is the first day we got to get out on the tundra. It was a beautiful morning. Excuse me, the tundra is just really interesting. So the tundra is above the tree line. It's actually very dry, but whatever water does come down, it does exist, typically stays. I mean, it's either frozen or it doesn't evaporate much, even though precipitation is not, they don't get a lot. As you go further north, you're going to see less and less vegetation. This is what I'm talking about is the tundra itself. The soils have had little time to develop following the retreat of the glaciers. So even we're talking about several thousand years, the soils, there's nothing there to break them down. There's really no bacteria. There's little, energy to break soils down. And so you just have rock and a little bit of stuff growing on top of it. But it's interesting how the vegetation is adapted. The tundra itself is spongy. There's permafrost underneath. It has a very short growing season. And because of that, because the sun's not very high and not very intense, it's driven the vegetation that's there to develop some interesting habits. The plants grow low to the ground because it stays out of the wind, which is, by the way, can be pretty wicked. And particularly wicked in the wintertime when it's blowing ice crystals, which would shred any vegetation above the snow line. They stay close to the ground to catch whatever heat there is. And they kind of grow on top of themselves each year and making a cushion that creates its own microclimate. And it didn't seem, initially when you look at the expanse, you'd wonder, well, gee, there's not much here. But then when you get this, slow down and begin to look, it's amazing what the different varieties are that are under your feet. Meg's shooting this little flower right here, which is actually the Greenland national flower, which is the Viriarsiac. I can't even say it, my tongue's not working. But what it is it's a dwarf fireweed, and that's as big as it gets. It gives you an idea. And there's actually many things there. There are berries growing all over the place. There's flowering, and this was in the early part of September. Over in the lower right, you have Arctic cotton, which is a plant that grows, and this is kind of the seeding head, and it's used a lot by the Inuit for wicks and their lamps and things like that. It was kind of like a little cotton ball. But the tundra is just interesting if you take the time to look at it. The other thing we noticed a lot was your sense of perspective is hard when you're not used to being out on the tundra. You don't have trees to assess how far things are away and so on. It's hard to gauge distances. You can see some of our team, our group is up here on a hiking trip. There was a little bear guard that's up over here. So whenever we get out, whenever we go for a Zodiac landing, the team sends out a scouting team first, like an hour or so before we're going, looking for polar bear, because the bears are there. They're they have tremendous sense of smell, better than any bear in the world. And we're not going to disturb the bears. So first thing to do is go and see if there's any bears in the landing area. If not, then they post sentries around the a large perimeter, allowing us to roam within that perimeter wherever we want. And when you go hiking for several kilometers, which some of them did, there's a bear guard that goes with the team. Now the guards have both non-lethal and lethal shotguns, basically. And they very seldom, in fact, I don't know anybody that had to use them. Typically, if they see a bear coming, which they can see, we're rounded up and we leave. So that's the story with the polar bears, which we saw a number, as you'll see. So we're moving on to August 30th. We went to Ilulissat, and that's where there's the ice fjord, which is a World Heritage Site, which is up in this part of Greenland right here. There's a glacier that moves about 60 to 75 feet a day at the head of this fjord, which is several miles long, and dumps its ice, calves the ice into that fjord. It puts out a lot of ice, as you'll see. In fact, most of the icebergs in the North Atlantic come from this one, what is it?
69%.
About 70% of the icebergs come from this one fjord. And the currents take them up the coast here, and then they come around. This is Baffin Bay right here. And then they come back and around. The currents take them down the east coast of Baffin Island and down to Labrador, which is off the chart down here, and Newfoundland, and off into the North Atlantic. So we got up early the next morning because the briefing said the ship was going to be getting into Ilulissat right around daybreak, and we wanted to see what it was like. And it was pretty impressive. All this ice, it's hard again to, excuse me, from this one picture to get an idea how big these things were, but it was neat. A little bit of, again, looking off the ship of the icebergs. This is Sissamut itself. It's about, excuse me, Ilulissat. Again, about 5,000 people. Very Danish in its architecture. Greenland is a Danish protectorate, even though it's self-governing. It was interesting, but we came in, went through the town, and the ice fjord was up at the other end of the town, which is behind us as we're looking at this picture here. So we walked out. This is a National Heritage Site, but this gives you an idea. You can see over the hills, you can see ice, huge blocks of ice standing up there. As we're getting closer, at this little beach here, there were signs up by the boardwalk that told you not to go down to the beach, because with the calving of this glacier, which can calve like almost 1,000-foot high blocks of ice coming off the front of the glacier, it can create a tidal wave that sweeps around this point right here and comes up and can swamp you on that beach right there and take you right out. And you don't want to be in that water. So it was interesting to see this place. This is all Arctic cotton right here. It's a beautiful place. As we came over the hill, this is the ice fjord itself. And right about this time, it was snowing and the wind was blowing, and it was very appropriate for what we were looking at. It was a pretty impressive place. A quick chart as to why the glacier goes so fast, excuse me. This is the west coast of Greenland here, if you can see my pointer. Ilulissat is right here, and actually underneath the ice sheet that forms the north, the top part of Greenland, there's an old riverbed that flows this way from prehistoric or a fossil, he called it a fossil river network. And the ice pressure comes here and it follows this riverbed and it all comes right out through this ice fjord. And that's what makes it move 60 to 70 feet a day. This is a chart by Mark St. Onge, who is a geologist and professor at Oxford, who was with us, and just a fabulous guy to give us presentations and explain things for us. Again, more of the ice fjord. It was a pretty interesting place. The light was with the snow. I mean, we saw that the snow as we got dropped off up at the other end of town. It kind of looks like it was here when you see a storm coming. And in actuality, after we saw this and started walking back and got back to the ice center, we got all recalled back to the ship because the wind had come way up. It was pretty, that ice was not soft. That snow was not soft. It was hard. It wasn't sleet, but it was just really blowing. And we ended up getting back on the ship in a rather exciting Zodiac ride as the seas were bouncing 2 to 3 feet as we were trying to get off the Zodiac and onto the platform. It was interesting. So the next day, we came out of Ilulissat here, and there's an island right here, large island called Disco Island, and we went into Disco Bay, and it's a center of seafaring in this northern part of Baffin Bay. Eric the Red was there in 982. Whalers used it a lot in the 18th and 19th centuries to water, to get fresh water and set themselves up as a storage cache for stores. The Franklin expedition, which was outfitted in 1845 to finally find their way through this part here. They had, at that point in the 1800s, they had understood this part of the north, but they couldn't figure out the last 300 miles or so. And Franklin would set out to find and finally get through the Northwest Passage. And he left in 1845 and never returned. So you'll hear more about that in a bit. So this is Disco Bay and Disco Island, beautiful place. And we had perfect weather that morning. This was like 7:30 in the morning. The light was beautiful. If we landed here and if you turned around, this is what you saw coming up the beach and going up the tundra and walking up toward the face of the mountains that were there. It was a wonderfully beautiful place.
Paths.
Say again?
No paths.
Yeah, there weren't any. You make your own path. There was no way. Nobody was really there to set any paths. A little more. There's water flowing where it's not flowing, it's frozen. But this is beautiful west part of Greenland. This is a really pretty place. Again, looking at the tundra, found this lady there that I kind of got along with well. But if you look closely, and we're there now in the fall, and the color is brilliant around. The yellow is typically dwarf willow. I forgot what the red was. It's another brushy plant. But there were plants and lichen, various colored lichens over all the rocks. It was really a fabulous place. The place you want to sit and take your time and enjoy. This was a cabin for researchers that were working in the area. So then we're moving on, and we needed to cross Baffin Bay, which takes about a day and a half. And having done our research, we knew that this crossing could be pretty rough. And it was exactly the opposite. It was an exceptionally calm processing. In fact, one that we will just long remember for what you'll see here in a minute. So it took about 36 hours to get across. We had this calm sea that lasted, it was just, the second half of the crossing was so calm, as I'll show you. And it was in the evening, and the light that was lasting, it was just memorable. I'll show you. Additionally, fulmars, which are northern birds, a part of the albatross family. They're about a wingspan of 2 to 3 feet. They follow the boat a lot, and they're great flyers. They soar and don't flap their wings a lot. They just seem to effortlessly fly. But as we came across, the sea got just glassy calm. And as it did so, we got to be around 6, 7, and the sun was low. And again, in the Arctic, the sun just kind of goes along the horizon. Takes a long time to get down. And it was just beautiful. It was just a magical evening. Took this shot off the ship. Meg and I were out there shooting along with many others for seemed like 2 hours, just as the light was going down. The sea was flat, and you could get photos like these that were just it's just memorable for us. In the background is Baffin Island, which is a little populated except at the southern end, but a mountainous island runs along the opposite side of the bay from Greenland. We just loved the patterns on the ocean at that time of night. So we found the icebergs out in the ocean. Next day, we're heading to another small hamlet called Pond Inlet. And it's an Inuit community of about 1,500 people. There's not many communities up here. There's Pond Inlet. Then there's that's it for this whole area, pretty much.
Well, one that we couldn't go to.
That's down for, so Cambridge Bay and Kugluktuk. But this was kind of anyway, the last place that we're going to see many Inuit people. It's a historic meeting place, and now regaining its culture. The indigenous peoples in this area, the Inuit, have been treated like most Inuit people in North America. They were not treated well by the Canadian government. They were forcibly moved to various places. A number of families in the 50s and the 1950s and 60s were forcibly moved into Pond Inlet, and have since made it primarily because the Canadian government wanted to establish a presence up here at their northern lands. And so they moved those people up there. They weren't asked, they were told. And now they're beginning to regain their culture. Now that Nunavut is a self-governing place, they're taking control of their destiny. So this is Pond Inlet, where we came in. Small community. We had one of our rare dry landings, got able to pull up to a dock and walk out without boots. This was our guide to take us walking through the community. This is typical Inuit dress. It's not Inuit fabric, mind you, but this cut is very typical of the Inuit clothing, including the big hood, the head hood that does double duty. We had a cultural presentation at the community center of the island. They were pretty proud to show us typical garb here by the speaker. Lighting of the seal lamp, which is basically a shallow bowl filled with basically Arctic cotton, a wick that kind of runs the length of the bowl. And lighting of the kulak is typically a welcoming gesture. You can imagine this has been used for thousands of years and is the only source of heat in the original Inuit dwellings. They didn't have wood to burn or anything like that. It was mostly seal oil. And once the huts were very, very well insulated with skins and sod over the top. And so a little bit of heat, once it got going, would do. Plus they were adapted. So we had some drumming, we had some Inuit games. This was one of our passengers who got selected. This is kind of seeing who can take it the most. pulling on each other. This is right up here is what they call the seal. And the point was to sit here and on one hand be able to go up and touch it with your foot. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And these are some of the games that they use to entertain themselves through as a typical native Inuit game. The village, the streets were all dirt because most of the time they're frozen and they don't plow them. They just pack them down and use it. We saw dogs in quite a few places as a little huddle of puppies. It was interesting to see how they live. And then we were heading out. So this is where the wharf was down here, and out we would go. This iceberg is probably grounded on the bottom and probably will sit there for, I don't know, years before it disappears. Got back on the boat, and we had a chance to experience country food. What's called they call it country food. It's basically what the Inuit diet is. It's the traditional diet. Mostly it's well, it is exclusively marine mammals: seal, beluga whale, narwhal; land mammals, reindeer, muskox, some polar bear, and fish, typically dried. They consume their native diet is typically consumed raw, usually fresh frozen. Excuse me, as you might imagine. They didn't really have source of heat to cook things, so most of it was eaten raw. But the fresh meat contains significant vitamins, typically along the skin, and a percentage of fresh meat has carbohydrates that are already in the muscles if it's fresh frozen, and they get carbohydrates from that. Little to any vegetables in their diet. If they have any, it's some berries, some grasses, and seaweed that they choose to use. But Margaret, do you want to comment on the? So Margaret, well, this was interesting. These are two members of our, down here, if you can see my cursor, of our expedition team were native Inuit. Excuse me. She had her fiance was living in Pond Inlet, and she was looking forward to the ship spending time, docking there, and she could go in and meet her in-laws. When we got there, the in-laws were away on a trip. So she saw some relations there, but when they came back, they had some narwhal, and Meg is sampling the narwhal. And then over here, we had other delicacies. I chose not to participate, but
I tried it all. Surprisingly, it was not, I expected it to be fishy, and only the seal meat was slightly fishy. And the fats were more of a cheese consistency and did not taste fatty. Some of it was very chewy. It was all raw. And I'm not used to eating raw meat, so I didn't overindulge or anything, but I was very curious, and it was pretty good. And they dry meats also, so they would have dried caribou and dried seal meat and kind of like beef jerkies and dried fish. Yeah.
And typically the meat was frozen, kind of semi-frozen, where and the way they typically eat it is they take a sliver off the hunk of meat, and that's what they would. The way they would eat it. Then we moved on up to Devon Island, which is this island right up here, which is now uninhabited, and is really it's the largest uninhabited island, I think, in the world, uninhabited. There's a marine preserve up here, and you'll see a number of other things, but it's a beautiful area. There was an outpost that was established in the middle of the 20th century to, again, establish a presence up there because Canada wanted to assert their claim to that area. So RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, had a station there, but in the 1950s it was abandoned because it was just too difficult to maintain. So we went in for a landing that day, and this was not atypical. Not a lot of sunlight, but if any, it was, damp, an interesting place. this is a typical landing again, and then we hiked over the hill in the tundra, and over here, these couple buildings are what's left. It's now a protected archaeological site. And it's maintained by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police because there is a small cemetery up here, excuse me, with 4 people buried. 2 of them are Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they maintain it to this day. So it's 2 of the 2 that are buried there, the 2 Mounties that are buried there, one committed suicide and the one shot himself and he died of the wounds. Accidentally shot himself and died of the wound. But it's a very remote place to be living and for extended periods of time. We moved on to Cumming Inlet and Powell Inlet. These are 2 inlets in the middle of Devon Island that were really wild. Devon Island has an ice cap and has a polar desert ecology. And interestingly, over in this part of the island, I learned that it's been used to simulate the Mars, the planet Mars environment, cold, dry, and very desolate, little to anything growing, and has been used to do some research as to existing and living on Mars. But this is the inlet. It was a starkly beautiful place. We did see a polar bear over here. I didn't get a picture of it, but we were landing on the other side. Margaret's crawling around in the tundra again. But again, getting down, there were these little. This is like now September. I mean, I looked at when we were in Pond Inlet, which was a couple days before this. The weather was in the 30s, low 30s to mid 30s. I looked at the weather, I think yesterday, the day before, the high was 19, and this is only a month later. So it gives you an idea. Here she's taking a picture of these little flowers that are growing in early September. How long they last, I don't know. But again, keep your eye on the ground and learn what's going on there. It was pretty fascinating. We did see one of these guys right here as we moved over to the next inlet. And actually, we were going up the inlet away, so we didn't have to wait for this bear to exit. But yeah, we watched her or him, we didn't know which, for a while, going along the shoreline looking for food of any sort they can find. This is a tough time for the polar bears because this is the end of the summer. You know, they really subsist on seals, and they need the sea ice to be in place so that they can capture seals waiting at their blowholes and so on to capture them. And that's what they live off. And then they just live off their own stores through the summer, except for some berries and anything else they can scrounge up during the summer. So it's a tough time right now for them till the sea ice forms. This inlet was just starkly beautiful again. Again, it's hard to get an idea of the scale here, but I'll show you some in a minute. But right around this point right here, you can see my cursor. As we were leaving, we found a haul out for walrus, and it was pretty fascinating. They weren't too disturbed, but there's some big creatures there. The walrus typically eat off the bottom. They eat clams and various things they can find along the bottom. They actually use their 2 tusks to root around with, and on the bottom. But again, the light was pretty, and it was an interesting place. Moving on, we went to Port Leopold on this island here, which is Somerset Island, and Prince Leopold Island, which is an island just off here that's a large bird sanctuary. I can't say it. Kanuaganajuk is the Inuit name of this island, and really it has evidence of habitation from around 1000 AD by the Thule, which are really proto-Inuit. The Inuit have come out of the Thule inhabitation. And you'll see some of the houses, house pits here in a minute. Prince Leopold Island is a migratory bird sanctuary. So this is Somerset Island. Again, it's hard to express the way the light comes in and just makes the place kind of magical. This is one of the Thule house pits. The Inuit would dig down and build a couple feet, set up a rock perimeter, and they would build a scaffold over that, either whale ribs or any other dead or driftwood that they could find. Cover that with skins, and then cover that with sod, and that made for a very weather-tight and thermal-proof environment. In this picture, you can see a couple other. You can just see them here. It was interesting to see. This seemed to be a very popular place for hunting and living to capture sea mammals, particularly. This is Akela. Did I say that right?
Akela.
Yeah, Akela, who was part of the expedition team. Alaka. I knew we were saying it wrong. Alaka. She is the past prime minister of Greenland. And she was part of the expedition team, taking us along and explaining things to us.
She was the first Inuit elected.
Speak up.
She was also the first Inuit elected as prime minister in Greenland.
Yeah. So, but she's a lovely lady and fun to be with. This is then we moved on the afternoon to Prince Leopold Island, which is a large bird sanctuary. These cliffs go straight up for about 800 to 900 feet. And it was just unworldly place. I don't know whether you can see here, there's a couple of zodiacs here. There's one here and there's one over here. It's just straight up. One of our expedition team, in fact, it was another guy, had spent summer doing research about the birds on the island and lived up on the top here, which is flat, and they could fly in there, or they couldn't have any other way of getting in there. But it was interesting. Along the base, we again came across a polar bear who was hunting along the base because birds, young can fall down, and there are various things. It can be a profitable place for the polar bear to hunt. We watched it for a while. We were out in the zodiacs, and we didn't get more than 100 yards away, maybe not even that, further away. Didn't want to disturb it, but it gives you an idea of the size of the place. This little dot right here, if you see my cursor, that's the polar bear right there. It gives you an idea of the size of this place. Different. Right there was the bear. Moving on, we went to Beachy Island, and in the morning and the afternoon, because of a polar bear, or excuse me, because the sea ice moved in, we couldn't go where we had planned to go. But Beachy Island is now a National Historic Site of Canada. It's where the Franklin expedition first did their first winter encampment. They got caught on the ice. They knew they would. They had planned to be able to survive that, had stores and so on, but they never evidently were able to get out of that encampment. There were two ships, and they were trapped in the ice there and never returned. In 1850, there was an expedition sent out to find them. They were rediscovered on Beachy Island. There were three graves and a cairn that were found. And Northwest Passage was never really successfully traversed until 1903 by Amundsen. And we'll show you a little bit. This is Beachy Island. Why he picked this, I don't really know. It is a barren, tough place. Again, the size right here is a couple of groups of our team. Let me go back. And there's another group up here. The graves were found roughly in this area. There were 3 gravestones, and a 4th one was added in 1903, I believe, by a seaman that fell in the water and perished. But it's a National Historic Site now, so you're really limited as to what you can go see. Excuse me. Again, scale. We have a bear guard right down here. There's another bear guard right here, and then we have a group hiking up to the top of the hill. Some people really wanted to go hike. It was clear that if you were going on a hike, on the fast hike, as they call it, you weren't stopping to take pictures. So we never did that. We did our own hiking, typically a little less adventuresome. Turning around, looking the other way. This is the Arctic. So in the afternoon, we moved south across the strait, and we're going to go up Cunningham Inlet, which is up in this area. It's interesting inlet. But as it turns out, the sea ice had moved in and had blocked the entrance. So we couldn't do that. So instead, we said, the expedition team said, we'll go out in the evening and go explore the sea ice. So that's what we got geared up to do. And out we went in the Zodiacs to go cruise among the sea ice in the late evening. And the sun was beautiful again. It was a beautiful evening. Probably one of our memorable evenings again. We had visitors, or that we had seals that were very curious about the visitors that were coming in among them. And we would see them and they would stop and look at us, and it was interesting. It was a fascinating area. Again, beautiful evening. So sea ice begins to form around 28 degrees Fahrenheit or so. And that was about what it was that evening. And you could begin to see the ice skimming over as we moved in and among the packs of sea ice. We also found some bears out there that we kind of sidled up to. Turns out they were handing out hot chocolate, which was kind of nice. But then we also saw evidence of bears, if you look over here, walking on the sea ice. So these are polar bear prints. So they're out there looking for seals. You can see a couple of Zodiacs here in the dark. It was a beautiful place. Then we began to move south, went through Prescott, went down to Prescott Island, which was right here. It was an uninhabited island. It was barren but pretty. Again, polar bear along the shoreline. We were moving in further up, and so while we waited a little bit, the bear didn't seem to come further where we were going. I didn't hike back into this area, but several groups did. There was a big pod of beluga whales back here along the shoreline. They like to, I guess, enjoy the warm water along the shoreline where it's shallower and gets heated up a little bit, but they said there was quite a pod of whales back there. Pretty area, very barren though. Then to move down to Bellot Strait and Long Island. This is the northern, this finger right here is the northernmost contiguous point of land in North America. You can theoretically walk up to here. Beyond that, you got to go across water to get further north. We didn't land there. It was just too foggy for a safe landing, meaning if there were bear there, we wouldn't know it. And that was not a good thing. So we didn't do any landing there. We moved on, continuing to move south. Paisley Bay, we had light fog and a strong wind, and we weren't really able to see much there. We moved along, and the weather began to get kind of really very windy down in here, and we were going to land in Cambridge Bay, but they couldn't make the ship go up. It was unsafe to try and turn with the wind and the ship up this very narrow canal, so we skipped that. and headed on. But here's just a brief picture of the landing in I forgot already, Paisley Bay. Again, the tundra, it was pretty wet and cold here. There wasn't a lot of growth like there was over on Disco Island and other places. What was there, you could see it had flowered. This now being middle of September, it was a pretty tough place. So after we moved past Cambridge Bay and down further, we got to Tualuk or Port Epworth, or called Tree River. I'm not exact. We didn't see any trees, maybe in the past. And that's down here. We've now moved quite a bit south from where we were up here. This area is also the ancestral home of several copper Inuit bands, and they're called copper Inuit because there was pure copper nuggets that were able to be found on the surface in this area. And those Inuit were some of the first peoples to use metal tools because they found they could form the copper. In fact, further south where we ended up in the Northwest Territory in Yellowknife, that's the way Yellowknife got its name, was because of the copper tools that the Inuit had used in that area. We also were exposed in this area as stromatolites, which are actually bacterial colonies that formed little mounds, probably about the size of 1 foot to 2 foot in size. And they're 2 billion years old, and they were the very first preserved form of life on the planet. In fact, they are what those bacteria were the principal reason there was an oxygenation of the atmosphere due to those bacterial colonies. And we were able to see them. They were exposed down there. So the other thing I want to point out, you'll see we're now roughly 400 miles south of where we were up at Beachy Island and up here. And the tundra is different. It's pretty beautiful. So this was a pretty wet landing, you could say. It was a little rough going in, and this is typical coming in on land. And much more brush, a foot and a half high. Beautiful colors in the fall. It was really a magical place and a beautiful place. Go on a little bit.
There they are.
This is the stromatolites. These were mounds. It's kind of flattened off a bit, but you could see right here also. In the rock, there were areas that were not, had to be from some form of life or something. And these were the stromatolites. Also, beautiful lichens and various very small mosses that were growing. It was a very lovely place. And again, the light was really, the sun never, was always low. So you didn't have these harsh, high angle sun shadows and so on coming down. They were low. You get a lot of backlighting. Typically, they would come through the storm clouds at times, and it was just fascinating place. We ended our trip over at Kugluktuk, which the colonial name is Copper Mine. And that's where another small community. The only way you get to these communities, you can't drive there. There's no roads to get there. You either fly in or you come in by boat. And there are not many boats coming in. So the community is there. They get ships in now and then to resupply the community. And they do have some by flight. But that's where we picked up a charter flight back to Yellowknife. And from there, we were on our way to make our way back to Philadelphia. So that was the end of the trip. A quick summary, and then we'll take questions. It was a unique and memorable place. It was an interesting trip to go through. The Arctic Light is special when you have it. We certainly had some wonderful days. We also had some days that were, I wouldn't say miserable, but they were wet and typical of what we would have expected. some snow, wind. It was the environment that we expected to have. A little bit about marine expedition travel. You know, prepare. Planning is a big part of it. Remember, you're limited by your physical stamina. You're going to carry it all. We're getting up in years. We got ready a little bit for this trip with, walking and so on, getting ourselves in shape. And then we took what we knew we could handle in terms of the physical bulk of what we were carrying. One backpack, typically hands-free for safe travel. Usually, for sailors, you say one hand for the boat, one hand for you. Zodiac travel, it's best to have two hands free. And that's why we used our cotton carriers and things like that to secure our camera equipment while we were moving about, particularly in the Zodiac. It's wet, so, you be prepared for that and be happy after that you're prepared and you're warm and everything's secure. And the other thing is you're going to be away 2 to 4 hours, and you don't want to have to get back to go to the ship because that's a process that takes a lot of time out of your time being there. That's the reason you're there, but be prepared for that. So it's a great adventure, an expedition by ship. One of the things I would say if you're researching and looking at an expedition by ship is check out the quality of the expedition team. See what their experience is, their knowledge, their size, see who they have going. Adventure Canada on their website had probably half the expedition team that we experienced on there with their biographies and so on. They really did an exceptional job. We have and would go with them again. So Adventure Canada is a small, family-run ship company that's done Arctic travel for a long time, decades. So with that, let's throw it open to questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Here we go.
Tom, that was real, and Meg, that was wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you.
yay.
Really felt like we were there.
Well, it's fun to share.
I wish you could have heard me gasping at your photographs.
No.
They were just gorgeous. So, it was
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great.
Tom, and Meg, your ship, I guess, was not any type of an icebreaker, right?
It was rated. I forgot the rating. They have a rating, several level rating for ships. It was rated ice worthy, which means it could push ice out of the way, but it couldn't get up and break ice like an icebreaker. So yes, it was ice rated and could safely go in and among the ice. But for instance, the pack ice, when it got there and occluded where we wanted to go, it wasn't going to go push all that outside because they would have had to go up and break some of it in order to get through. So we went around the pack ice.
So that ice sheet that formed, that was too dangerous. The boat wasn't prepared to go break that apart.
No, it chose to go around. Actually, during the night, we were told the next day that they had to go a fair amount out of their way to get around the pack ice to start going down toward the southern part of our trip. If they had to move ice aside when we got to Ilulissat, where the ice fjord was, we watched them gently move a few ice bergs out of the way. They weren't big ones. They were probably half the size of a house. They weren't real big, but he would gently move them out of the way with a ship. He being the captain, we watched him nestling in there so he could get close enough to the harbor to land us with Zodiacs without too long a travel, to get in. It was still probably a mile or so away, but it was doable. So yeah, it was an ice rated ship.
Tom, how much time did you have with the locals? I saw that one where they had the ceremonies and games.
Right. When we went to Sissemet, we had, our expedition team really took us through the town, but they had arranged there was a local museum there and several other little things they'd arranged to have them open and have us come in. They'd basically already paid for whatever needed to be done. In the Inuit community of Pond Inlet, which is the one I showed most of. Adventure Canada, I think, has had a long relationship with that Inuit community. They've done, we wrapped how many presents? We
Oh,
wrapped,
yeah.
they had the guests and the crew, or the expedition crew wrapped, I don't know, they were probably a Zodiac boat full of gifts, Christmas gifts that were being given to the Pond Inlet to be distributed for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
And they, in turn, they welcome us in to their small community. They took us again to the community center and did this cultural presentation for us, which was really, quite interesting and touching in a way. And they took us through their community, and you get an idea of what it's like to live up there. I mean, they are remote,
Do you have any idea about their healthcare?
Not really. I think we were told, somebody asked that question, remember, on the ship. There is a hospital / clinic, I guess you would call it, as part of their community. It serves a rather wide area, but as you can imagine, it's not like you're going to run down to your corner, what do they call it?
Urgent care.
Urgent care, to get care. I mean, if you need care, you're going to come from a ways, and then if you have to,
They fly them out.
Yeah.
If it's a real
Yeah.
serious problem,
they fly
they
them.
end up flying them out to a larger facility.
And that's part of their healthcare. They're part of the
But
Canadian.
they've
How
been
do
there
they
thousands of
communicate?
years.
Yes.
Again,
They've been
How
there
do they-
thousands of years, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But they, last year when we went down more to the south again with Canada, one of the big concerns up there in the north is tuberculosis, particularly in the last century.
Yeah.
And, you can imagine a cold, wet environment, and things that get started in a cold, wet environment, they're tough to control. And tuberculosis was a real problem, and I imagine still is a concern. But we had, just again, talking a little bit about expedition travel, we had on the ship, we had a doctor, actually two doctors, as it turns out, but the Adventure Canada funds their own doctor on board and runs a clinic for those on the ship. And as we left Ilulissat that evening, and it was in the snow, it was snowing and blowing, and the seas were a little rough. And we're at the front of the ship where the restaurant is, and it's a big area. You can eat along the side. There's some windows on either side, and we're eating with, it's interesting. You usually sit with different people every night. There's no assigned seating. You just do it yourself. But we noticed the ship stopped. It had been moving, and now it's dusk, getting dark, and a Zodiac pulls out from the ship and said, "It's not. It is snowing, and the waves are going 3 to 4 feet, and it's tootling around out there for a while, and then it comes back, and then it takes off. It had 2 people, and now it has 3 people, and it takes off into the snow." And couldn't figure out what was going on. We were told the next day there was one of the passengers had a pneumonia situation that the doctor was not comfortable with treating, and they took her back, him or her, I don't know which it was, back to Ilulissat through which had to be 5 or 6 miles astern, through the snow, through the wind, and everything else, and then came back. And we were told the next day or two that the person was fine, but they didn't like treating him on the ship. So that's part of, if we had been up at Beachy Island or something like that, I didn't mention this, but for instance, you cannot go on this trip without $500,000 of health insurance and evacuation insurance. They won't take it. That's part of the prerequisite for going on this trip. Because if you got sick like that up at Beachy Island, there's no way you're getting out of there except to be evacuated out. So it's just another part of adventure travel.
Hey, Tom, this is Marshall, and I was just wondering, when you mentioned about that pack ice, does that form pretty quickly overnight?
No, actually, I don't know a lot about it. I know a little bit about it. There's old pack ice, there's new pack ice. And it moves typically with the currents and the wind. And yes, it does form, the new pack ice is forming as you can see a little bit in the picture. But the ice doesn't really melt over the summer, at least it hasn't to this point. And it usually comes down from further north and is brought down by the currents and by the wind and goes in a pack. You know, it can be extensive, it can be miles in size. And, you know, once it comes in and kind of packs in with the wind, it's not, you can't get through it. Zodiacs can find their way through it, but a ship of any size would have difficulty getting through it. So that's some idea of what the pack ice is about.
On your, in your group, what percentage of the people were really there for photography?
So I'd say a third, maybe. I mean, really there for photography.
I mean,
Yeah.
that probably was that
Yeah,
your
there were-
focus?
Go ahead.
Was that your focus pretty much? I mean, obviously you wanted to experience everything, but
Yeah, we typically had our cameras with us all the time. Yeah.
I think lots of people had cameras. I think serious
There was a lot of cell
photographers,
phones.
serious photographers, maybe 20 to 25% of the group.
okay.
I said a third, you know, whatever,
Because-
it's in that range.
You know, when you looked at who was down on the beach or doing the moderate hiking, not even moderate. So there was kind of a strolling hike, a moderate hike, and an extensive hike. And then there was beachcomber. So most of the photographers were beachcomber and in the not more than the moderate. The moderate, even they moved a lot faster than
Well,
you wanted.
they characterized the hikes as
Yeah.
you know, the intensive hike was, we're not stopping for any photography.
Right.
We're going for 6 kilometers and we're going just to stretch our legs and see what we can see. Then there was the moderate hike, which was maybe 2 to 3 kilometers, 2 to 4. And they said they would stop occasionally for photography, but you got the feeling like, you know, you're going to be, don't hold the roof up.
Yeah. Don't, yeah.
Okay. And then there was, typically it was either beachcomber, which just means you can sit here if you want, do whatever you want. In some places, they weren't comfortable with letting us hike a long ways or letting those people hike a long ways. They set a large perimeter with the bear guards, like maybe a kilometer and a half. And you were free to roam within the bear guard perimeter. You know, you had to be within sight of them and you couldn't go beyond them. But if a bear guard, you know, wanted to raise a warning and bring everybody together, we needed to be able to do that and get back to the landing site. So that was
Were
typical work.
Were there any in your the staff of the expedition, were there any photography experts?
Yes, several. And there was a Adventure Canada dedicated photographer. Okay. They brought their own professional photographer to kind of capture the whole trip. And she produced at the end a number of images. She produced daily some images that were shared.
You did some work.
Yeah, that's right. She did some workshops. And there
I
were,
mean,
go ahead.
I think I mean, I just thought your pictures were amazing, and that's so different of a place, like especially the ice and the water and the sky, to try to get all your exposures correct. I just wondered if there was somebody who sort of hadn't, you know, had clues for you.
Yeah. Well, she was, the really nice thing about the Adventure Canada is they make their expedition team, you know, they curate them to be available to you throughout the trip. They don't sit aside, you know, among themselves, so to speak, when we're having dinner or stuff like that. They intentionally come out and spread themselves out among everybody to have dinner, lunch, and so on. And so you get to know them pretty well. And you can, you know, you can come up and ask them anything. And they're pretty good about, you know, sharing with you, besides giving lectures. Each one of them probably gave a lecture, at least 2 or 3 different lectures, probably during the 2.5 weeks we're on there. So yeah, there was, I know there were cell phone workshops.
Yeah.
Okay. There were some photography workshops, although the dedicated photographers just seemed to kind of share with each other a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and talk, and we were out on deck a lot more than maybe some of the
Right.
other passengers. And so
Yeah.
you kind of got to know who was trying to shoot things and who wasn't.
Yeah.
It was good that way.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, how long was your trip and about how much did it run as far as like double occupancy?
When you say how much did it run, what do you mean, cost wise? Or
Yeah, yeah.
um, well, we had a break, but I think the going price for this mid-level cabin was, I don't know, 12 or 14, somewhere around there. Well, again, we had a break. No, I think together, originally this trip would have been around probably 20,000 for two of us, but we got a break and you can get breaks. I mean, they're on sale at times and so on.
They also have single occupancy.
One of
They don't charge.
one of Adventure Canada's claims that one of their marketing features is they have single availability without any surcharge.
Mhm.
So, you know, mostly you get a surcharge if you want to go single. And they certainly had cheaper cabins. Like I said, we were mid-level at that price. You could probably get down in the, for two, I'm talking about, in the 12 to 15 range. Or this is a, you know, a 17-day trip. It's a long,
Right.
long time.
Tom, how
I
did the,
I
how did
encourage
the
you to-
native people, the Inuits, how did they communicate with each other? I assume they didn't have satellite phones. But how did they reach, like, help, etc.?
I mean, in today's environment, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, they do have, you know, they have what I'm trying to say. Well, they certainly have, they have cell phone service
Yeah.
throughout, you know, when you're there. Now, we didn't have, when we got, you know, 3 or 4 miles outside of Pond Inlet or any of these other centers, there was no service. You know, then you're doing satellite phone or just marine radio or whatever you needed to do. But they had, I don't know, they had, you know, direct TV in terms of whatever they wanted to do, you know, if they wanted to pay for it.
In the villages.
In the villages, they certainly had
so
cell
the
phones.
villages had internet?
Yeah, they did.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Wow.
Now, again, I'm sure it cost them something. I didn't ask, like, for instance, whether the community is funding portion of it or it's all individually funded, you know what I'm saying? But they all had cell phone service and they were up to date on how to use it, you know?
Nice.
So their source of power is what, Tom? Are they just generators and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They don't now I think on the Greenland side, I think they may have had some hydropower. But when you get over to the Canadian side, the Inuit communities, I think they're mostly generator. I think when we got over to Kugluktuk, that may have had hydropower come in from a ways away.
Well, that previously saw trees, lakes,
Yeah.
whatever,
Tree River.
Tree River.
Yeah.
I think that's where some of their.
Well, I'm just saying, I think they had some power, but it's either generator powered or hydro powered. And there was some solar power too.
no, that would be tough in the winter.
Yeah.
Good.
It still works. I mean, they don't get a lot of snow, but what they get doesn't go away. You know?
Right.
And it's really the tundra is more driven by the wind and the cold than by the snow.
Mhm. Yeah,
In
it's amazing that it is a desert.
Yeah,
In fact,
Very dry.
the snow, they're getting more snowfall and it's actually creating more of a problem with the warming trend
Mm.
because snow insulates.
Yeah, yeah.
Things don't get as
Well,
cold.
and they had was related to is Greenland had they never really had like what am I trying to say, ice storms, you know, where you get rain and it forms ice like we get here at times. But they had one in Greenland several 9 years ago that nearly wiped out the muskox.
Hmm.
And the reason might wipe out the muskox is the muskox get, obviously they're vegetable eaters, but they get to the plants by using their hooves to scrape away the snow to get down to the vegetation to do it. But this ice storm came in and laid down an inch or so of ice, and the muskox couldn't get through it.
Hmm.
And many of them starved.
Oh,
So it's a consequence of, climate change. You don't understand sometimes all the ramifications of what can happen.
yeah, because it's such a delicate environment up there.
Yeah, it is very delicate up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how the vegetation has adapted and the animals have adapted,
Yeah.
And the people.
And the people.
You
Yeah.
think that they've lived on this diet and they've lived up there for thousands of years,
Yeah.
and they don't have scurvy or anything else.
No.
And they didn't want to move south.
And they don't eat vegetables and they don't eat breads.
Yeah. Meg, are you feeding Tom raw meat now?
No, I didn't touch it. She's a meat eater.
I'm the one that ate the raw meat.
Yeah, they probably don't have to eat as much either because it is raw and so fatty.
Yeah, but they also burn a lot, just
Yeah, that's
their
true.
metabolism is probably higher than many of
Yeah.
us.
Interestingly, most of them cannot tolerate milk products because there is no milk product in their environment.
Yeah.
So now they're getting milk products and many of them have a problem with it.
Mm.
Things that we just normally don't think about.
I remember as a kid, an Inuit came to our grade school as a presentation, and it was fairly chilly in the air. She was sweating. She couldn't stand that 50-degree weather. It was horrible for her.
Well, yeah, you look at their, their classic dwellings, which are usually dug down a little bit and then covered over, to form an igloo-like structure, although it's not ice-based, it's skins and so on. It's very, very then contained. And the killick, that seal lamp, was their source of heat.
Yeah.
It would warm that place up sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be taking off their clothes, which, they don't have changes of clothes typically. The historic Inuit. I mean, they have one set of clothes that they would wear in their environment, and that was it. But inside, where it was quote unquote warm, it was too warm, so they would shed their clothes. As Alec said,
Yeah.
they invented the thong.
Yeah.
Just to let you, because they would take all their clothes off.
Yeah. All I could think was the polar bears knocking on the door all night. That would freak me out a bit. Because I'm sure they know. I'm sure that the bears know that underneath that little mound is some raw meat.
Yeah, probably did.
Probably. They could
Yeah.
smell it 15 kilometers away. So
Yeah.
They're interesting animals.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about them. I just didn't put it in the presentation.
Mhm.
But they have the most sensitive nose of any bear and probably most any mammal on the earth.
Now, from what I understand, they are moving south.
Yes, there's
They're
been
cross-
evidence they are.
They're
Yeah.
crossbreeding with some brown bears and things like that.
And the vice versa is happening.
Yeah.
The southern bears, so to speak,
are going north.
North.
No. Yeah.
So is there a political problem with bear immigration?
Open borders. Yeah.
And open
Not
borders up in Canada?
No, I didn't hear anything about that. No.
Thank goodness.
So from a practical point of view, these little mound huts that they live in.
Yeah.
What happens to the outhouse? Do they just go outside?
Yeah.
And it's still there from thousands of years ago, Vince.
Well,
Yeah, I'm just thinking if they're down to their thong on the inside of the hut. And now they have to go outside and it's 0 degrees.
They do
I
it
hear
quick,
you.
Vince, very, very
No.
quick.
I didn't delve into that with them, Vince. I'll have to think about that for next time.
Well, we are talking about that was part of what the European, when the Europeans came into these cultures, and this is 100 or 200 years ago, they were very offended and felt there was something wrong that these people were undressing in their
These
huts.
barbarians.
But in this day and age, of course, they're all living in, what did you call it? Housing that they brought in.
What?
They're not living in the huts now.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, I thought they were still living in the huts.
No.
No.
Oh,
Now they may, if they go out and hunt, they may,
okay.
they may do that because, you know, in the winter, that's typically when they do a lot of their hunting, is when the ice is formed. And, you know, they go out and track down seals and stuff. They also get seals from kayaks. You know, kayak was really a major mode of transportation up there. So, no, but they don't, that's traditional housing, you might say. We in Sissemet, we saw kind of a semi-modern home, remember?
Oh, yeah.
It was a sod hut, quote unquote, you know, built up from the permanent house, but it was lined inside with cedar. It was
It was
beautiful
gorgeous.
place. And very, very, you get a sod hut, not much is moving through that once you get it built up. I mean, in terms of, it's pretty windproof, you
So
know?
did they have to bring that cedar in from somewhere else?
Yes,
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no cedars growing there.
there was a whole, you're right. There was in the picture I had, well, I won't go back and show you, but of Sissemet, there was a church up on the hill. And we got up there and we, you know, it wasn't a large church, but it was still a church. And we asked them, well, where did they get the wood for this? Well, they contracted to have it built in England and then shipped over by pieces and reassembled because there is no form of lumber.
No.
Well, Tom, I have a question. Do the Inuit, do they actually go out and hunt the polar bear or anything like that, or the seals?
The seals, they still do. They're allowed to harvest. Like they have a quota that they're allowed to harvest. Yeah, they still do hunt seals. I don't know about the polar bear. They do narwhal. They'll do beluga if they can get one. And again, there's a quota. And they even, I read, they would go after the what's the big
Walrus.
Oh, the walrus.
well, the walrus, but they would take, it was a very coordinated hunt. It had to take like 6 or 8 men in order to hunt a walrus, just to be able to, you know, harpoon it and then be able to bring it in and subdue it. I mean, but this was, you know, there's subsistence. I mean, that's they either
Oftentimes use guns. That's what
well
that
they do
narwhal
now,
was
but
killed
I'm
with.
saying they've lived there thousands of years, and you know, it's subsistence. You either survive, you either hunt and get something, or you're going to starve. And there was no other option. So they learned, they know that area as most indigenous people do. They know the secrets of that area better than anybody does.
Hey,
You know?
Tom, I've heard stories of Iceland being run over by photographers or getting to be overly popular. Um, I'm taking it that where you went wasn't like that.
No, it's interesting. There's a website, I can't remember the name of it. But if you put in, for instance, the Ocean Endeavor as a ship and you say, where's the Ocean Endeavor? There's an automatic ship tracking. Ships routinely send their location up to this, it's a satellite-based network, and there's a database that keeps track of where ships are. The reason I'm saying that is you can pick an area and you can expand it and you can see all the ships that are there. Okay. And you look at Iceland or you look at, well, look at the Galapagos, for instance. Oh my God, it's overrun with ships. But you look at Europe and so on, you'll see a lot of ships. You go up into the area we were at, and you see more ships than I thought you'd see, particularly in August and September. And then as we were one of the last couple of ships in that area, period. There are not a lot of ships up there. One, they've got to be able to address the ice or they can get in trouble. Or, and I think that's principally it. There's just not a lot there are more ships than there have been. Let's put it that way. There used to be very few. There's now more. But you look at Iceland, for instance, on this overview of how many ships are there. There's a lot of ships around Iceland. And there's more and more ships on East Greenland, because Iceland's not that far away from the eastern shore of Greenland, which is very wild. And if you looked at that map of where it's peopled, there's really nothing on the eastern shore of Greenland. There's some on the west where we were. but some of the ships go in there. A lot of the east coast of Greenland is a national preserve anyway. So
This is a funny question maybe, but you enjoyed using your camera, I assume, because it was lighter and more portable. Did you run across any photographers where you felt sorry for them because they brought too much stuff?
oh yeah. Yeah, and they're lugging huge packs of stuff, you know, and I'm just like, uh, that's why we didn't do that anymore. And it's just carrying a lot of stuff for us. I mean, it may have made every sense in the world to those people. I'm not judging them, you know, or anybody that's doing that, because there are reasons you would want to have that equipment with you. I'm just saying it's a lot.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared to handle that. You got to do it safely. And we just wanted to be able to move and enjoy the environment and hike and move around easily and get our photography in at the same time and not have to compromise too much. Some of them, I mean, I couldn't handle some of the equipment that was being wrestled around. So
So you said
Well-
you didn't use your wide lens as much as you thought you were going to.
no, you know what I ended up doing? Because I didn't want to commit to having to carry it with me, and there weren't going in, I didn't see that there were some big panoramas, although there were some. So I got good at doing, you know, panning and taping multiple shots and then
Mhm.
stitching them together back home.
Yeah.
And that worked pretty well.
And then
Mhm.
my camera comes down. and-
And she had a more wide, she had a zoom that went from fairly wide to medium telephoto, but the compromise was, you know, a higher f-stop.
Mhm.
So those are the compromises you make. So
Right.
Meg could catch the wider stuff if we needed to.
Mhm. So your teamwork.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. No competition there. Okay.
No, we take very different pictures. There's not
It-
much competition.
It's interesting, you know, I'm sure you've seen it when you go out with groups, you know, and you're photographing the same environment and the pictures come back so different.
Yeah.
You know.
Hopefully they do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with Sullivan, we had things that overlapped. If they overlapped, it was because she was taking an event, but I had a longer lens, so I had a better picture of it, and
Mhm.
vice versa. There was an event that needed a wider lens, and I had the 300 with me or something, then she was going to get that better than I could. So.
Right.
Well,
So-
Meg, I could see that you were taking more or less the micro photography or so. You were right down there on the top.
You know, it was in Camera Club that somebody said, no, you need to look at things from a different angle and it really helps to get low. They were not thinking about 4-inch high things, and that's
Totally.
all there was 4-inch high. And how do you get low enough? Well, you have to lay down and look sideways at it.
Mhm.
Yeah, we saw you on the ground. Was Tom on the ground much?
Not much.
No, not as much.
That's
Yeah.
where teamwork comes in, you know?
And I actually get fascinated with what I'm seeing on the ground. But Tom's the one that likes to do the micro photography.
Macro?
Yeah. Tiny, I mean, he'll take the
Oh.
bugs and, you know,
Really?
do all kinds of very fine things that I
Mhm.
wouldn't. do. But for whatever reason, when I get out in nature, I really gravitate to lichen and all these little patterns.
And she sees spirits and things that I never see the spirit.
That's right. He misses
She
them all
sees
the time.
forms and things that I don't see. So,
Well, she's eating the raw meat, so
That's right.
that's
Darn right.
probably why she was seeing this.
That's where the teamwork comes in. She can do it. So,
Well, I really appreciate your time and sharing this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
well, it was
Yeah,
fun.
thank
It's
you.
It was-
fun to share it. You know?
Great
Really
job,
great. I wish we
guys.
could have been there in person, but
Yeah.
Well, if it's any consolation, my wife went back out tonight, about 7:30. And multiple roads were closed, 183, 12.
Wow.
She zigzagged all over the place. It was a mess.
Good.
7:30.
So we made the right call. Good.
Yeah.
That would not have been fun. Yeah.
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 All right. Thanks,
All right.
Tom. Meg.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
It
you, everybody.
was
Great.
really
Thank you very
great
much,
to hear.
Tom, Meg.
See you.
We'll have to get
Good to
together
see
next.
We
Let's-
really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom,
Bye-bye now.